So we have talked a lot, and we've heard a lot of people talk about how AI is limited by various factors. Server space, GPUs, just the level of the actual algorithm. But one thing that's not talked about as much is energy, how AI is literally limited by the amount of energy that can be pulled from the grid. Grace?
That's right, Roman. Well, just this week, Meta just signed a 20-year deal with Constellation Energy for nuclear. For 20 whole years, they're going to be directly getting nuclear energy to power all of their artificial intelligence. So this comes just months after Microsoft signed the same deal with Constellation Energy, also for nuclear. And of course, you guys might remember that just a few weeks ago, President Trump signed an executive order, also basically getting rid of a bunch of red tape, making the permitting process for nuclear energy facilities so much faster, so much easier. Because essentially what has happened is, as we talk about so much, AI has just taken off so quickly. And then one of the things that came up was like, oh my gosh, where are we going to get all of the power from? Because of course, over the last decade, there has been such a push for renewable energy, not nuclear energy, but for solar panels, for wind. And all of a sudden, what is needed is just not there. Because what a lot of companies have been finding over the past couple of years when they've been using this technology, getting it off the ground, testing it out, is that the grid could just not handle it. And if it was going to continue in this manner, it could cause potentially statewide outages. That's how much it needs, because especially at the rate that it's accelerating, AI is going to be needing to use basically the same amount that cities use when it comes to energy. And there's only one source that is available to us on this little Earth right now that can provide that type of energy, and that's nuclear energy. So a lot of energy experts are saying that this is it. This is going to be the nuclear renaissance that so many people have spoken about. The nuclear revolution is really here this time because essentially, one, AI is so critically important from now a national security point of view. As we were saying the other week with China, we're really in a race with AI, and the United States' position is that you absolutely cannot let China win the AI race. So from that perspective, the United States is fully behind this huge use of energy to produce this AI or to be able to hold the infrastructure. But even just from a business perspective too, all of these big businesses that, their minds are just going crazy thinking of all of the potential possibilities for revenue and for innovation using AI, they are also fully behind this gigantic use of AI and thus this use of energy. So you have the government sector, you also have the private sector coming together and interests really aligning here. So it really looks like that is going to be the future. And my prediction is that we are going to see a lot less interest and talk about solar and wind, because for AI, it's just not viable whatsoever. And you're already hearing a lot of people that are, very concerned about climate change coming out and sort of changing their tune on nuclear because they can see the way that the wind is blowing and saying, actually, this doesn't produce any emissions either. Maybe we should give this another look.
So speaking about the private sector, I think that Bill Gates has Palantir. And I say this because I've been listening to him for the past few years talk about the need for us to use nuclear, not only for the effect that it has on climate as opposed to burning fossil fuels, but also because he envisions that our tech would need to use this. And this is before ChatGPT came out. Of course, he knows these things, but he's been shooting from the hip on this for a long time. So he's actually been building these power plants. He has this one big nuclear power plant. It's not active because he was waiting for Trump to, he was waiting for the world to catch up with his brain. Yeah. But another problem that is brought to my mind when I think about this is I know that in order to cool nuclear power plants, they use a lot of water. So you're talking about, okay, so if we divert all of the electricity on the normal grid, it will slow down the amount we can use for our cities, so we need to power these things with nuclear. But if you look at what's happening with like Google's data centers and like people who live near them, they have like no water pressure because their data centers are being cooled by water. And then these nuclear power plants also need to be cooled by water. So I think the next thing is they have to figure out the water issue.
And they are trialing all sorts of different ways to try and cool these systems down without such a ginormous use of water. I forget if it was Google or another one of the main companies, but they actually tried to build their data centers underwater in the ocean. You know, there may be some potential there, but it doesn't look like it's taking off just yet. Also just massive cooling systems, more like air conditioning rather than water. Of course, the air conditioning still does require water, but not as much as it otherwise would. But it's just ginormous. I was reading that when you ask ChatGPT just one simple question, it uses the equivalent of about a 17-ounce bottle of water just for that one question. One question. So can you imagine when we're using it at scale, as some people are predicting in people's day-to-day jobs or just huge government programs, you know, all of these different softwares, it's just, you know, really unthinkable. And they have to use fresh water. They don't want to use salt water from the ocean.
They're also looking at northern climes. Right?
Well, I was going to say, if only there was a big, fat, ice-filled island somewhere in the northern hemisphere that's cold. Like
It's called green.
Yeah, it's a green renaissance. Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh, 60 chess.
Or you could dig into volcanoes, because there's also geothermal energy that's getting renewed
Iceland.
interest. Well, no, you can have that in the States, not an active volcano. But you had last week, President Trump fast-tracked a geothermal project. It's mostly in Nevada, because that's the western end of this country is closer to the Earth crust. So basically, geothermal, like you tap into the heat of the planet, the heat boils water, creates steam, and then voila, you get energy. So back to steam,
Well,
which is also green.
You know, it is really like interesting though when you think about it, because right now you think like, oh, AI models, like it's sort of limited by people's imagination and like what the technology underlining it is. Remember that like a few weeks ago there was that Chinese company that all of a sudden like blew all the other AI models out of the water. DeepSeek, right? So you think like, oh, it's limited by that, but actually it's like limited by just straight energy, right?
Yeah.
Or-
Or to be the case.
So is mining Bitcoin and other crypto.
Right, all the data centers. And I mean, that's the thing that's so interesting, because it never occurred to me. And surprisingly enough, I mean, some people have definitely been thinking about this, but it seems to be both the energy and the water aspect of it is something that so many people have overlooked, because I know in some countries they thought that it would be a great opportunity to offer up their land for these data centers. They saw a lot of money in it, but then they realized the water that would be required, and due to outrage by the locals, those facilities never went ahead because it was just too resource draining. Yeah.
Well, actually, you mentioned geothermal. Iceland had a renaissance recently because of their geothermal situation. They have like, I don't know how exactly the island is set up, but they have basically like a volcano situation that's perfect for generating geothermal energy. And so a lot of companies wound up basing their kind of electricity intensive work in Iceland, and it just like propped up their economy like crazy.
It's also really cool. They've got greenhouses everywhere. So they're actually self-sufficient in a land that doesn't grow much in like tomatoes and cucumbers and lettuce, because they had these geothermal warmed greenhouses. It's very cool.
All right, Grace, any final thoughts on the future of AI and how it's limited by energy?
Well, I think that a positive that could come from it is that hopefully it will make the world less reliant on China, because that was always a really fundamental concern of mine with green energy, because of course it sounds really nice. And, you know, I grew up in a household where we had solar panels on the roof, and I had 3-minute showers, and then it got cold. But no, I can see the advantage for sure in green energy. But it's the fact that so much of it is made in China is just so extremely concerning. And so for a lot of people that are really concerned about climate change and really advocating for this green energy, they often would turn a blind eye to the human rights abuses in China and to all of the horrific things that are going on there, and the million reasons why you shouldn't be making products or sourcing products from China, because they thought, well, with emissions, you know, the positive outweighs the negative. But now with nuclear, if this really does take off, as it's looking that it is, already power plants are getting so much money into them again, because all of these private companies are putting money into them. Ones that were going to shut down are now starting up again. If we move more towards nuclear, and that can come with its own challenges, but it should sever that really those hooks that China had into the green energy sphere.
Yeah, and you know, nuclear is an interesting kind of energy source, because the biggest kind of obvious downside to it is the risk of explosion, right? Like what happened at 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl. All right, I know exactly what you're thinking. That was a great clip you just watched. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to follow and also check out either these videos or maybe they're on this side. I don't know which side they're on, but we set it up. So these are the videos that YouTube is suggesting to you as the best ones that you'll probably like the most. So check them out, this side,